Good morning, NCC. It's so great to be here. Yeah, get excited. Welcome to Chapel. We're going to worship together this morning, so let's stand and sing this out together. I feel it in my bones, you're about to move. I feel it in the wind, you're about to ride in. You said that you would pour your spirit out. You said that you would fall on sons and daughters. I feel it in my bones, you're about to move. I feel it in the wind, you're about to ride in. You said that you would pour your spirit out. You said that you would fall on sons and daughters. So like the rain comes, drenches in love, and let your glory rush in like a flood. And we are fixed on this one thing, to know your goodness and see your glory. We're transformed by this one thing, to know your presence, see your beauty. See, I can see it now. I can see it now, your kingdom come. I can hear it now, the sounds of heaven. You said that if we ask, we'll receive. So we're asking for the greater measure. So like the rain, come drench us in love, and let your power rush in like a flood. And we are fixed on this one thing, to know your goodness, see your glory. We're transformed by this one thing, to know your presence, see your beauty. Let's just invite him here this morning. So come and blow on through, Spirit move. We're ready for you to come and blow on through. Come and do what only you can do. So come and blow on through, Spirit sing this song with the King of my heart. And let the King of my heart be the mountain where I run, the fountain I drink from. Oh, is my song. And let the King of my heart be the shadow where I hide, the ransom for my life. Oh, is my song. 'Cause you are good, you're good. Oh, tell him you are good, so good. Oh, and you are good, you're good, Jesus. Oh, you are good, you're good. And let the King of my heart be the wind inside my sails. You're the anchor in the waves. Oh, is my song. And let the King of my heart be the fire inside my veins, the echo of my days. Oh, is my, sing it again, let the King. And let the King of my heart be the wind inside my sails, the anchor in the waves. Oh, he is my song. And let the King of my heart be the fire inside my veins. You're the echo of my days. Oh, he is my song. 'Cause you are good, you're good. Oh, just tell him you are good, you're good. Oh, you are good, you're good. Oh, for all you've done, Lord, you are good, you're good, so good.
And you're never gonna let me down. You're never gonna let me down. Let's sing it out. You're never gonna let, you're never, you're never gonna let, you're never gonna let me down.
You're never gonna let, you're never gonna let me down. And you're never gonna let, you're never gonna let me down. I believe it. 'Cause you're never gonna let, you're never gonna let me down. And you're never gonna let, you're never gonna let me down. 'Cause you are good, you're good. Oh, you are good, you're good. Oh, you are good, you're good. Oh, you are good, good, Jesus. Oh, and you're never gonna let, you're never gonna let me down. And you're never gonna let, you're never gonna let me down. You're never gonna let, you're never gonna let me down. You're never gonna let, you're never gonna let me down. You're good. Ooh, just sing it out. You are good, you're good. Ooh, for all you've done, Lord, you are good, you're good. While we sing, oh, yes, you are good, you're good. We're going to sing a new song next. It's called Jesus at the Center.
think it's the perfect song to sing at the beginning of a year like this, because I think it's the most important part of why we're here. I don't know where you're at with this whole Jesus thing, with the whole relationship with God. Maybe this is your first time being at a worship experience like this. Maybe you came here ready to work in the church and live for Jesus. So I don't know where you're at. Maybe this will be the first time you sing something like this. Maybe you need to renew a promise like this. But we're just going to sing the words. Just Jesus be at the center of my life. Jesus be at the center of it all. And I think that's such a beautiful and simple, powerful prayer to sing out at the beginning of a year like this, that Jesus would be at the center of our lives, at the center of this school, the center of all that we do in the next coming year in our life. So let's just sing this out. It's really easy, so just follow along the words. Be at the center of it all, Jesus. 'Cause Jesus at the center of it all. Jesus at the center of it all. From beginning to the end, oh, it will always be, it's always been you, Jesus. Oh, Jesus, and nothing else matters. Oh, nothing in this world will do. 'Cause Jesus, you're the center, and everything revolves around you. Jesus, you. And Jesus be the center of my life. Make this your prayer this morning. Jesus be the center of my life. From beginning to the end, oh, it will always be, it's always been you, Jesus. Oh, Jesus, to nothing else matters. No, nothing in this world will do. Oh, your church. Oh, Jesus, be the center of your church. And every knee will bow, yeah, and every tongue shall confess you, Jesus. Oh, Jesus. Oh, Jesus. Jesus. Something about your name, Jesus. Oh, Jesus. 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 From my heart to the head. Jesus, be the center. It's all about you. Yes, it's all about you. From my heart to the head. Jesus, be the center. It's all about you. Yes, it's all about you. From my heart to the head. Jesus, be the center. It's all about you. Yes, it's all about you. From my heart to the head. Jesus, be the center. It's all about you. Yes, it's all about you. Yes, it's all about you. Yes, it's all about you. Well, you're the center of it all. Yeah, God, that is our one desire. That is our prayer this morning, that you would be at the center of our lives, the center of this place, that everything that we would do would glorify your name. We love you and we thank you for this opportunity to just worship together. And I just pray that you would speak to us this morning. You would open our hearts to what you have to say to us. Pray all this in your name. Amen.
Please be seated. This is a day of firsts, and I noticed that there's some people wearing some red gear over here to my right, and I understand that this is the day of our first soccer matches, right? Is that right? So 4 p.m. over at the Springfield Fields, and if you are able to be there, I know that the team really appreciates that. Even you can only be there for a while. Let's support our soccer team. I'm also pleased to introduce our speaker today, Dr. Paul Alexander, and this is his first time at Nebraska Christian College as the president of the university. And I think that's really cool. I was on the Hope campus in Fullerton last spring, and I saw this headline in the student newspaper, Dr. Alexander recommended for HIU president. Now, I kind of knew that was going to happen, but boy, I was so excited because I just think he's going to be a terrific president and really loves being at Nebraska Christian College. I want you to welcome him in just a minute, but I have one more first thing to do. This is our convocation chapel, and it signifies in the academic tradition that the beginning of the 75th year of Nebraska Christian College has now commenced. We are convening ourselves to commence that year. And in order to do that, we have a really ancient tradition here, and we have a thing called the alumni bell that's just been around for eons, I think. And so one of the things that I do to mark the beginning of that new year, and as soon as I do it, Dr. Alexander, you can come speak. I'm going to ring the alumni bell. So would you stand for this? And here we go. Everybody stand. Ready? Woohoo!
Thank you, Dr. Krause. Hey, it is great to be with you today. So, 4 o'clock? So what time do we start practicing before the game? 3:30. Says, I have skills. So I played soccer in college. I scored up to 1 time. With my head. On purpose. So I'll be there early. We'll kick the ball around a little bit, all right? Good luck today. So I want to share with you a message that comes from a strange place in my background as we put the slide up for you to see. So I have 3 degrees, and they're not really related to each other. I have a degree in preaching, a master's degree in therapy, and a PhD in leadership. That's a really weird pedigree, right? How do those relate to each other? At the start of each program, I was the one in back looking up terms because I didn't know what we were talking about. So today my message comes from that middle slice of my background, the therapy part of my background. I'm a licensed marriage family therapist. I have 6,000 hours of clinical experience, which is not a lot, it's not a little, but it's enough. In my therapy training in the late 1980s, I had a class on family systems theory. If you're a psych person, a human development person, you'll eventually learn about family systems. And I remember this one lecture early on in my program about how families tend to produce certain kinds of children. That one lecture changed my life. So I'm going to share a little bit of that lecture today. I'm borrowing from a 30-something-year-old lecture from Phil Robinette, who was the professor. I'm giving you that, and I'm adding to it today. This is called 3 Roles and a Reversal. Back in the 1960s, there were researchers up in the Bay Area in California that started doing research with families that had high degrees of mental illness in them. And they asked the question, what does mental illness in moms and dads do to kids in the family? And they found out that the more stress existed in the family, the more likely it was the family would produce predictable kinds of kids, predictable roles. And 6 or 7 or 8 roles kept coming up over and over again, and especially 3 roles came up. I'm going to share those with you today and see if you identify with any of these 3 roles, and I'll be pretty transparent about which one I identify with because it's first. So the first role we're going to look at is the hero child. Now, one thing that's interesting, as we took that original research from the Bay Area and extended it to all families, we found that, somewhat surprisingly, all families tend to produce these predictable roles, not just super stressed or families that had high degrees of mental illness. Truth turns out, it's a lot of families. The most predictable role, easiest to identify, are the families in which we have a child that's really good at everything. This is called the hero child. Let's see if you identify. You don't need to put your hands up. In fact, don't put your hands up. This is the child who's often born first, and they're really good at stuff. They have a lot of trophies in their life. So I found this picture. I love this guy. That's like the hero child dream, is to earn the whatever, right? The award, the certificate, the trophy. And not the just because you're on the team trophy, but like a legitimate trophy. So that's last year's National Spelling Bee champion, and look how happy that young man is. He probably memorized 10,000 words. He knows the derivation of every word you can possibly imagine. Hero children live for the spotlight. We love attention. When we play a game, we want to know the rules so we can dominate the game, right? And we want to catch people when they don't follow the rules. And then we tell on them quickly. Hero children are they're very successful. They go higher in organizations. They make more money, and they die younger. You're welcome. Because they're so stressed, right? There's more heart disease, there's more cancer. So I have 2 kids. Leslie and I have 2 kids. Our firstborn is the ultimate hero child. When she was little bitty thing, she wanted to be the best at everything. And when she couldn't be the best, she would get really upset. So what is she doing now? She's in a PhD program learning to be a research deep dive, scuba diving cancer researcher at UCSD and Scripps Institute. So that's not stressful at all, right? She's following type. She loves achieving. She loves solving problems. I go, what do you love so much about chemistry at that level? She goes, Dad, she gets this look. She goes, Dad, it's one big puzzle. I go, okay, cool. I don't know what you're talking about. I have no idea what any of you do. I don't understand. Just please be safe when you scuba dive. So our firstborn is a hero. Now, I was in the classroom for 16 years, and I dealt with my fair share of you, hero children. And here's how I knew I had one. I knew I had a hero child when they would get less than an A and fall apart. I knew I had a hero child when they would get less than an A and fall apart. Early in my teaching career, I had a young lady who sat near the front, smiled and nodded at everything I said, was always tracking. She got her first midterm back. It was Intro to Psychology, and she earned an 88. Not bad, right? She fell apart. She made an appointment with me, came into my office with the test, crumpled up in her hand, and she said, I want to talk to you about my grade. I said, okay, what questions do you have? She goes, well, I think I got this one right, and this one right, and this one right. I think it was 3. So I looked at the 3 and I said, you were close, but the actual answer is this, and this, and this. She took the paper, crumpled it up again, and slammed it on my desk and said, then I don't want this. I said, okay, would you rather have a 0? Or would you rather have the 88? She goes, an 88 is the same thing as a 0. So, being a therapist, I said, tell me more. You guys, she sat back in her chair and she just wept. She said, I don't get B's, I get A's. So, well, do you have to get A's? She goes, yes. Why do you have to get A's? She goes, because that's what people expect of me. So we spent the next half hour in a little mini therapy session called, You Need to Relax. You're gonna kill yourself. Ultimately, she was afraid of her mom and dad not loving her if she failed at anything. So she was driven to perform at a high level all the time. But here's the problem. You cannot always get 90-somethings. You can't. It's impossible. So I always have a special place in my heart for hero children because I am a full-on hero child. So see that other graphic up there? Only people my age and older would have any idea what that is. Jane Yeck may know. So Jane, yell out what that is. Do you know what that is? Mark? It's Jet Cadets program from the 1960s in Christian churches. And this particular age group of Jet Cadets was called the Whirlybirds. And the Whirlybirds were clearly extra special young Christian boys and girls who proved their worth in God's eyes by earning plastic stuff you could sew on your head. So there's a helicopter and a badge and a small nuclear reactor. I don't know what all's on there. But you could earn stuff by bringing your Bible, knowing where books of the Bible were, being good, doing all the right stuff, at least externally. I thought this was fantastic. I was so excited to promote up into Jet Cadets, and then they canceled the program. Sunday school teachers. Hero children are close to my heart because I get them. I'm wired like that. My wife was a hero child growing up. We are under the assumption that if we perform at a high level, we are worth more. It's exhausting. The next child is one lesser known to me, but known to some of you. The rebel child. The classic image here from The Breakfast Club, which is hopelessly out of date now. But I love this character at the end of the movie because he's still a rebel with a soft heart inside. Now, I really hadn't been around rebels until 6th grade, and I met my first true rebel child. We'll call him Joe, because his name was Joe. Joe Cook, in the middle of the year in 6th grade, did the following. Mr. Rokangas, that's his real name, Mr. Rokangas said, get out your clean sheet of paper, it's time for a spelling test. So we all got out a clean sheet of paper, because we're all at some point or another, in some way or another, we're all hero children. And I look over at Joe Cook, and Joe Cook did not get out a clean sheet of paper for the test. And I thought, Joe Cook must not have heard Mr. Rokangas. Because there was now tension in the room, and Mr. Rokangas and Joe Cook were looking at each other. And for those of us who are rules and authority-minded and bound, this starts making us anxious. And I'll never forget, Mr. Rokangas' face started turning the color of the soccer shirts, and he said, "Joe Cook, get your piece of paper out." And Joe Cook just stared back. What? And then the test started, and Joe Cook never got a piece of paper out. And as a hero child, I thought, this is not right. We have a test, it's actually started, and Joe Cook is just sitting there. I did not know non-compliance was an option. Did you know that? That you don't have to do stuff that you're told to do. A week later, we came into class one day, and Joe Cook was no longer in our class. He finished the year in Mr. Gersten's class. But that's the first time I realized not everybody follows the rules, right? Some of you grew up enjoying being in trouble. And I know you enjoyed it because you kept doing it over and over again. Some of you know what I'm talking about, right? So Joe Cook was not the first rebel that I met. A couple of my friends in high school were rebels. A couple of you in here may have been rebels. So I'm drawn to hero children. I love working with leaders who are too anxious. I know how to speak that language. My wife is a middle school teacher, and her soft spot, her sweet spot, is working with rebel children, because her big brother was a full-on rebel. Her big brother Dad died at 39. Her big brother Brad died at 39. He smoked himself to death. He was in trouble from the time he was a young teenager, almost until he died. He finally turned his life around and gave his life back to Christ and turned his life around about 2 years before he died. But my wife grew up aching and hurting for a brother that was very bright, but just messed his life up in so many ways. So Leslie has this passion to help middle schoolers that are just, some of them are, I think the clinical term is knucklehead, right? You know what I'm talking about? These middle schoolers are they're just knuckleheads. So she, 1 hour a day, every day of her professional life, spends with 12 boys at her middle school that are on the verge of getting kicked out, because she believes in them. And here's what I know about rebel children. They are really tender-hearted. Oftentimes, rebel children live in the shadow of a hero, and they realize that spot is already taken, so they figure, I'm not going to get attention doing that, so I'm going to do this. And they run the opposite direction. Interestingly enough, a lot of rebel children also have learning disabilities. So that's embarrassing and awkward for them. They don't know how to cope, so they sort of camouflage that by being in trouble. And they're really good at it. But deep down, they are tender-hearted and they're sensitive. The third child is the one that we know the least about, but it is a really predictable child. And it's called the lost child. The lost child is the one that's not great at everything and not in trouble. They're quiet. They're often in the middle of the birth order. They're almost always shy. Now, 47% of us in the US, me included, are shy or claim to be shy, and we would also admit that the shyness has cost us some things. The lost child seems to have an extra dose of shy. You guys tend to drift to the back. You tend to drift to the edge. And one of the things that needs to be developed in your life, maybe the main thing that needs to be developed in your life as a lost child, is your voice. The ability to start sentences with I want and I need. And it's a really hard thing if you're shy and if you're quiet. Parents that have lots of kids will often find themselves really surprised when they find out that one of their kids is a lost child, and that they have a friend that nobody knew about, or a hobby or interest at school that nobody knew, because lost children just figure out how to do things on their own. You're isolated, you're self-sufficient, you're quiet, you're humble, but here's what I know. You're lonely. There's a core loneliness that comes from being the quiet one, isn't there? There's a sensitivity that comes to other people who are lost, and that's great, but there's also a core loneliness. Now, let me go back to the hero child for just a second. You don't need to advance the slides back, but let me just go back to the hero child. So over the years when I've gone over these roles with my students at Hope, I'll ask this question, and I always get a chuckle. What kind of professions do you think hero children go into? The firstborn, super good, achievers, know all the rules, really good at being in school. Guess what kind of professions they go into? Go ahead and say out loud a couple guesses. I heard nothing but mumbling. So, but that went excellent. Here's what they go into. Ministry, teaching, social work, therapy, ministry, ministry, ministry. Makes sense. See, hero children, when we're really little, are really good about being around people that are older, and we're really good at reading the room and taking care of people that are hurting and anxious. There's a lot of pressure on us when we're little to act older than we really are, and we get a lot of good feedback for it. We're good caretakers. And then you realize, I could actually make a living doing this, right? I could take care of people. So we are. We're good, caring nurturers. But we burn out really easily. So here's what today is about. It's about looking at your position. If you identified, well, raise your hand if you identified with any one of these three. If you identified with any one of these three, almost everyone. So what do we have to do? Well, I'm a visual person, so I have always envisioned what we need to do as flipping a switch. So go ahead and advance that slide. The reversal. We have to flip the switch. So I'm not a wrestler, but in 7th grade, I was forced to wrestle by this stupid gym teacher. God bless him. Mr. Krichton made us do different sports, mostly that we didn't know how to do and weren't very good at. And I hard to believe now, but I wrestled in the under 80 class with Michael Fry. We were the only two in that weight class. It was the smallest weight class, so I only had one person to wrestle, and Michael Fry beat me every time. It was super good for my ego. Alexander and Fry get out. So literally, small Fry beat me in wrestling. Super awesome. Right? But I remember this one move where if you could position your body just right, you could totally reverse the way that you were stacked up, right? You could be in this position, and then you could throw a reversal, and suddenly you were on top, and you win, and you get the trophy. I never got the trophy. Not that I'm bitter, but it's fine. Right? So we have to do a reversal. We have to find a way to switch this. Advance the slide. So there's a little switch up in the corner. And I want you to think about the possibility that no matter what your stage or position, you could switch up. You could switch off where you have been and find a new place through Jesus. The hero child reversal, this is a tough one, requires an internalization of grace. Yeah, that's not our strength. Hero children don't speak grace because we know works. We know performance. We know achieving. We're not big on grace because who deserves that? You didn't work for it. That doesn't seem right. When hero children read about Mary and Martha in the Bible, we feel like it's kind of a trick and that somebody got the raw deal in that story. Read that story later, hero children. Well, just keep reading it, in fact, until you realize why Mary is the hero of that story and not Martha. Hero children need grace because no matter how hard we try, we know internally that our life is full of 88s and 86s and 74s. We don't want to admit it, we don't want to tell other people about it, but we know that in spite of the trophy case, we know we're jacked up inside. We are. I am. When I read the list of fruit of the Spirit, if I'm honest, there's work to do. You know what I'm saying? So I need grace. I need to know that no matter how close I get, Jesus makes up the difference. And that I need that every day of my life. And so do you. So we need to switch. We need to dedicate ourselves to reality that no matter how hard I try, I'm not perfect at everything. I'm just not. Neither are you. And stop trying so hard. Hero children need to breathe. Take a break. Give yourself permission to just be, to just worship in spirit, and let God speak to you. Rebel children, what does the switch look like? This is a hard one if you're a rebel child. The switch for you means you've got to become vulnerable. One of the decisions you made early on as a rebel child was to not need anybody. How's that working? How's that working? Is that fulfilling to try to live alone and out on the edge of whatever group? What I know about rebel children is that you are very tender-hearted, and you need to let people see that. You also need to trust that there are people in the world, like my wife, who look at you as you really are, not as your file says you are. One of the things my wife does is she does not read the cumulative file on students coming into her class because she doesn't want to be tainted by what other people have said about her students. So she does not read the cum. All the other teachers always read the cum, that they want to find out strengths and weaknesses. My wife says, this gives me goosebumps, everybody in my class every year gets a fresh start. That's what rebels need. You need to know that there are people that will give you a fresh start. There is a college that will give you a fresh start. There is a Savior who gives you a fresh start every day. And he does for my rebellious parts. He does for my rebellious parts. Lost child, this may be the hardest of the switches to throw, because this requires you taking a step. Two of you were nodding the whole time I was talking about the lost child, and I'm not going to look at you. More of you may have identified than just the two. Your switch looks like this: step. You have got to take a step toward other people. You have got to move closer to relationship. There is no safer place in the world, listen to me, than a small Christian college to take a step. I promise you. There is no other place in the world that's easier to take a step than a small Christian college. So don't hide behind whatever it is. I challenge you to head closer to relationship. And if you're shy, I know it's painful. I know it is. I'm shy too. I had to go to a church Sunday and meet a bunch of people I don't know. And after it was over, I went back to bed because that's exhausting. Taking a step into relationship is tiring, but it will change your life. Now here's a master switch I'm going to throw. And here's a pivot I've never done before. I want to ask you to think deeply with me for just a second about what all three have in common: the hero child, the rebel child, and the lost child. And I want you to think with me deeply about this and see if you agree. If you don't agree, don't say anything. We'll talk after. But follow my logic here. In spite of the fact that one says lost, I want to argue that all three of these kids fundamentally are lost. Just recently have I come to that realization, and I've been thinking about this material for over 30 years. I really think all three kids are lost. Heroes were lost trying to perform our way to God. Rebels are lost because they don't want to let their true self out. They're wrapped up in this other thing, this other persona they've been doing. And lost are lost because they're hiding behind and beside. So my invitation today to you, whether you've been a Christian for a minute or a life, is to let yourself be found again. Let yourself be found. Colossians 1, the last 5 verses of that chapter written to the church in Colossae, uses a repeating theme that makes complete sense if you know the book in context. The church dealt with a lot of Gnosticism and a lot of magical, mystical knowledge that was being touted as life-changing. Paul writes this letter to the Colossian church and says, let me tell you the real mystery. The last 5 verses of that book are life-changing if you hear it with new ears. Here it is. Paul says, I'm a minister of this gospel so that I can share the mystery hidden through all the ages. And that mystery is this: Christ in you, the hope of glory. You guys, we spend so much of our time running toward stuff. I spent a lot of years running toward career, a lot of years running toward stuff, a lot of years running towards my hobbies. I have hobbies that I love and I'm really into. But ultimately, that running is futile and not fulfilling. As baby Christians, we often run to worship and run to church and run to youth group so we can go find God and try to move close to him. Here's the mystery. There's no move needed. Christ in you, the hope of glory. So if I'm a hero child, it's already okay to get an 88. If I'm a rebel, I have a new day. And if I'm lost, I have a friend closer than I can ever imagine. Nebraska, let's not hide. Let's not isolate. Let's not engage in knucklehead behaviors. Let's be a true community. So I'm going to ask whoever was playing acoustical guitar to come back. And she did not know. And if she's gone, then another kind of guitar. And if we have no guitarists, someone will hum. It's a curve. So I'm going to ask you to do something spur of the moment. Thank you. If today you have been feeling a little on the outside, not on the inside, while these guys play whatever it is they're going to play, would you just come up to the front? Come close. And Dr. Krause and the faculty and I are just going to pray with our hand on your shoulder. We're not going to ask you what's going on. We're just going to put a hand on your shoulder and pray for you. If you have been feeling like you're kind of on the edge and you just need to recenter, if you've been feeling like you need a friend, if you've been stressed or down or anxious and you just need a friend, won't you come forward? Just stand up here, somewhere up here, while we play. We're going to put a hand on you. We're just going to pray quietly. And if you're not coming forward, just put a hand out, and we're going to pray for our friends. After a few minutes, I'll come up and I'll close in prayer. Come on up if you need prayer. So, God, I ask for a blessing on each man, each woman, staff, faculty, administration. God, I ask for blessings on our hearts, and ask for blessings on the heart of this campus. I ask that NCC be a refuge where we feel loved and safe and comfortable. God, thank you that you are not a God who is far off, but right here, right now. In Jesus' precious name, amen. God bless you. If you came forward, way to go. I appreciate that.